The number one defense in boxing is your feet. That's what's made the Soviet style so effective. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the pendulum step, which is the fundamental pillar of the Soviet style, helping you get in and out of range, as well as around the ring more effectively. You'll leave this video with the knowledge of the correct pendulum stepping technique, along with some patterns to make this more multi-dimensional, i.e. you can move in different directions whilst pendulum stepping. You'll also learn how to throw punches whilst you're pendulum stepping, and I'm going to give you some drills to make your pendulum steps better. So what is pendulum stepping? Pendulum stepping is typically a Soviet style of boxing, or a part of Soviet style of boxing, where it's a footwork technique where you're bouncing in a sort of rhythm in and out of range. Right? You're not really stepping like this. You're more just pushing off with either foot to get in, out of range, or taking angles, because we'll cover those patterns later. But pendulum stepping is using the change in direction with our feet, shifting our feet forwards, backwards, or in different directions to move ourselves in and out of range and around the ring. Let's start by breaking down the basic pendulum step technique. So we want to get in our stance, 60% of the weight on our back foot, 40% on our front foot as always. This is going to allow us to be in the right weight distribution for punches, even whilst we're pendulum stepping. Now, pendulum stepping, we want to be on the balls of our feet. We can push through the balls of our feet a lot more effectively and with staying on balance a lot easier than if we were pushing through the whole of our foot, or definitely not our heels. So we want to stay on the balls of our feet like this. It's going to allow us to transfer our weight forwards and backwards a lot more efficiently. We also want our ankles to be rigid. Rigid ankles, nice strong ankles that aren't flimsy like this, means that as we skip forwards and backwards, we're not going to roll our ankles like this, injure ourselves, and it generally just keeps us more on balance and more stuck in the ground as we shift. The next bit is coming up to the knees. Now the knees want to be sort of the opposite of that. Rigid ankles, soft knees. Super easy for me to push off either side, as opposed to if my knees were stiff and my ankles were going all over the place, it's not going to be as effective. When we push forwards, we're pushing through our back foot, and that means that all of our weight is effectively going to be in our back leg. So we're starting in the 60-40 weight distribution, and then as I push forwards, I'm basically transferring all my weight onto this back foot, and I'm lifting this foot up slightly to be able to spring forward. However, when I land, all my weight now pretty much goes into this front foot, in particular the front ball of my foot, and that's how I push off going backwards. So it's a constant transferring of weight from one leg to the other. You need to get comfortable with that. So doing a simple drill like this, going forwards and backwards, so what's going to help you get used to it? Pushing off either side. Now, if you stay on the edge of range and you do this constant pendulum stepping, it tricks your opponent into thinking, okay, when are they going to attack? So if you're just there on the edge of range like this, you're sort of setting a rhythm, and then you can go forward twice, and that's when you'll land your attack, right? But if you constantly bounce on the in and out of the edge of range, it's kind of like you're feinting, making them react, and then off their reactions, you can throw your attacks. One thing you need to watch out for when you're bouncing in and out of range is your opponent can predict your rhythm. So if you just in, out, one step at a time, then your opponent could literally step in as you're about to step in yourself and throw a punch. So you want to sort of break up your rhythm, and you can do that by bouncing in and out different amount of times. So for example, I could go 2 in, 1 out, 2 back, 1, and I could just keep switching this up and just keep them guessing like this. So we know how we can get in and out of range effectively with the pendulum step. But what if we want to take angles? Now, a small ring craft lesson for you. You kind of want to be attacking, moving out, taking an angle, attacking again. Right, so imagine I've come in here, thrown some punches, then I want to get out of range, I want to take an angle, and then I want to get back in. If you keep repeating this cycle throughout a boxing match, then your opponent is constantly going to have to be like adjusting to where you are
and that time where it takes them to adjust, you're already throwing your next attack. Now you don't have to come all the way out of the range. When you do this, you can come into range, stay there, throw your punches, take an angle, throw more punches, take another angle. But when it comes to the pendulum step, we can do this as we're moving around, and this is like we can do this in a circular motion with our pendulum steps. And how we do that is we're going to bounce or step in once, and then when we get here, I'm going to push off with my front foot at a slightly different angle till I'm here, and we'll get back in, and then another angle, and then we can go back the other way, another angle, and that's how we can change the angle as we're coming in and out with our attacks. So it looks like this. I could be throwing punches as I do this, but we'll cover that later. We can use this constant transferring of weight to incorporate pivots into our pendulum steps. And we do that by, let's say I've stepped in, as I'm pushing out, all my weight's on this back foot, which allows me then to push off and take an angle with my pivot. My weight will be on my back foot again, so now I can push back in and continue that pendulum step in motion. Can also do the same with the other way. So I'm pendulum stepping like this, weight goes back, and then I can push, and I'm back to here. So it should look like this. Okay, now I'm going to explain how to punch whilst you pendulum step. Now, because this is a longer range style, you want to be as side on as possible. Now, the reason for this is being side on offers more stability in the long range, because the only punches that I'm going to take here are straight shots, because they're the only punches that can really reach me. Whereas if I was closer range, you can be a little bit more square on, because that offers more stability to the sides, because I'd be catching hooks from here. Obviously the force would be pushing me that way or that way, as opposed to that way or that way. So you need to be nice and side on when you're throwing punches, when you're pendulum stepping. Now there's only 3 or maybe 4 different punches that you should throw whilst you're pendulum stepping at the same time. Reason for this, the rest of them sort of require, in particular the right hook and the left uppercut, they require your feet to be a little bit more planted, especially body punches. Whereas if you're constantly skipping in and out of range, it's very hard to plant your feet in those little microseconds in between to get those punches off. So the 3 punches that I recommend that you pendulum step with are the jab, the cross, and the left hook, in particular the long lead hook. The main rule with punching whilst you pendulum step is that you don't really throw a punch mid-air. You sort of want to time your punches as you land either side. So we'll start with throwing the jab as you pendulum step. I'm only going to land my jab as I'm pushing off with either foot. So my jab is going to land as my front foot lands and when I'm pushing off with it. And same again when my back foot lands. So go there. Or with the back foot. And that is used to set up other punches. Let's say I pushed off with my back foot as I jabbed. That sets me up ready to push off with my cross, which we'll cover next. So the cross, we still want to maintain that rotation in our hips. We throw a normal cross, we're rotating our hips to let that punch go. It's exactly the same when we're pendulum stepping, but because we're shifting in and out, we need to sort of rotate our hips mid-air. So as I shift in, I rotate my hips to that position, which means I'm pivoting on my back foot, and I land as my front foot lands. So be like that. Take a jab. The next punch we're going to cover is the long-range lead hook when we're doing the pendulum steps. Now, I think this is one of the more effective punches you can use, especially when you hook off the jab like the likes of Bivol does. So when we throw the lead hook, again, we can either throw it as we're stepping or pendulum stepping backwards, so it'd be then, or we can do it as we're going forwards. This is like less common, but as we push off forwards, we can throw it that way as well. But the main time I see this used is when you use it, when you step in with a jab and then come out with a lead hook. So either feint with a jab or throw the jab and step out with that. If you imagine, if I threw a jab as I stepped in, that usually provokes someone to try and counter with a right hand. So if I push off from my front foot and I shift back out with a lead hook, then I'll lightly land on the target and counter their right hand as they step in to try and counter me. So as I'm coming out, they're throwing their right hand to try and counter my jab. That's when I'd catch them with the lead hook there. Now, when we're throwing the lead hook whilst we're pendulum stepping, we need a little bit of hip rotation, or at least something that triggers that rotation, because it's a rotational punch. Right, so when we step in with a jab, we kind of want to shift our hips into more this position. So when we push out, we can come back the other way like that. Another way we can do this is not by rotating before, but by over rotating past this point as we come out to there. There isn't going to be much room to be able to rotate our hips properly during this pendulum stepping technique. And that's why people who use the pendulum step, or generally Soviet fighters, they don't, or people with a Soviet style, they don't really punch that hard, unless you're talking like Klitschko. But if you look at like Alexander Usyk, or you look at Bivol, they don't really punch that hard. They're just really effective at picking those points, getting in and out of range. And that's because they're not standing with their feet planted and generating all that force from their feet being planted. They're shifting in and out and picking points like that. Here are some effective combos you can use alongside your pendulum steps. The first one being a jab, left hook, as we were just demonstrating. So I step in with a jab, and as I push off, push back and loop that long range lead hook in. Should look like this. So pendulum stepping. The reason why this is so effective is because, as I said earlier, it provokes that counter right hand, so we can counter the counter with our lead hook. The next one is building on that combination, and that is stepping in with the jab, stepping out with the lead hook, and then with all that force, we've got all that weight on our back foot, we can push back in with that cross and then straight back out again. So the footwork mechanics is jab in, left hook out, cross in, and then step back out. So be and then building on that combination again, we can add another lead hook to the end of that. So we can step in with a jab, step out with a lead hook, step back in with a cross, and step back out with the lead hook again. So like this. I just wanted to give you some basic combinations that you can build on with these 3 simple punches. So work with those 3 different punches and see what you can come up with. Here are 3 drills that will help you get better at pendulum steps. The first one is shifting in twice, back once, repeat that, and then it'll be back twice, forward once, and repeat that. So it'll be 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out, 2 back, 1 forward, 2 back, 1 forward. The next drill is moving in a circular motion. So we talked about earlier, taking angles as we pendulum step. We're going to do 1 360 anti-clockwise and then 1 clockwise. So it'll be like this. Remembering to cave our knees in, remembering rigid ankles, remembering to keep our shape. Once we get back to here, just get back round again, keep repeating that. And the last drill is incorporating some head movement with our pendulum steps in and out. So as we're shifting forwards, I'm gonna slip inside, right? So I'll slip to there, and then as I'm shifting back, I'm gonna slip outside. So I'm shifting to here. Right, remember when we're slipping, we're slightly leaning at the hips and rotating our hips from here. So rotate our hips from here and lean, take our head off the center line. Same going the other way. But we're just gonna be shifting in and out as we do that. So look like this. Then we can incorporate that with some combination punching. Like so. And you can build up your pendulum step in style and become as good as someone who does pendulum steps really well. Safe.